Charles R. Drew (1904–1950) was an African-American surgeon whose research resulted in blood transfusions being able to occur without the need to match donors and receivers per their blood type. Dr. Drew proved while working on his dissertation that blood plasma, which can be separated from the part of the blood linked to type, can be stored for much longer periods than the whole blood and without refrigeration. As part of the research for his dissertation, Drew set out to assess the blood and transfusion research to date, and to apply his findings to a trial blood bank program. He reviewed the history of blood transfusion as well as all the current research on blood chemistry and fluid replacement, including the Soviet investigations. He then evaluated all the variables that might affect the shelf life of stored blood, how it was collected in open or closed vessels, or under a vacuum, what types and amounts of anticoagulants and preservatives were used, the shape of the storage containers, storage temperatures, and so on. In August 1939, he and his professor John Scudder obtained funding and authorization to set up an experimental blood bank at Columbia University's Presbyterian Hospital to work out the organization and best collection protocols for such an operation. After Charles Drew received his Ph.D., it was John Scudder who asked him to leave Johns Hopkins Hospital, where he was working, in order to develop and manage a plasma donation program. Scudder was working on a whole blood program. Drew's work on blood plasma and blood banks was extremely useful during World War II. Dried plasma could be transported over long distances, be reconstituted with water, and transfused into the blood stream of wounded soldiers safely without concern for the soldier's blood type. To encourage blood donations, Dr. Drew developed the use of bloodmobiles capable of refrigeration, which allowed the storage of whole blood as well as plasma. His bloodmobile was used to collect blood donations in America to send to help save the lives of British soldiers during World War II as a part of a program he referred to as Plasma for Britain in a letter to his wife. After the success of the plasma program, Dr. Drew was asked to do something similar for American soldiers through the American Red Cross, and he became its first director. The beginning of his time at the American Red Cross is documented in a letter to his wife, which also provides insight into his relationship with John Scudder, with whom he worked with while completing his dissertation and had soured after Drew became its director.
Scudder, of course, was very hurt when the job which he has felt that he was creating for himself was not offered to him. I truthfully felt very badly for him. There is no doubt about his knowledge of the subject and his deep interest in it, but he antagonized so many people that his nomination for the job became almost an impossibility. I tried to save some of his face by adding his name to my report to the Board of Medical Control. I feel I have now paid back in work and favors any debt I might have owed as a result of his early kindnesses to me here in New York. Our relationship will never be entirely cordial, for there is enough of the Nietzschean about him to feel that, man is but to be surpassed, and he will not ever take kindly to the idea that I started under him and gradually took over. Tonight he is leaving for a trip to Florida and a well-earned vacation. I wish that it were possible to turn over to him this job. No one will hear of it, so I am grooming Earl Taylor as fast as I can.
In the same letter, Dr. Drew talks about being separated from Lenore, his wife.
For you, I know, it has been a disappointing period. Our separation has caused us to miss much that we may have shared together. For this I am sorry. Many of the days and nights have been lonely here for me. I know that they were much more lonely for you, but from times immemorial, men who have beat out new paths into unknown regions have had to strike out alone, leaving all that was dear behind. These have been new paths that I have been treading, Lenore. As new as the uncharted seas that the early sailors defied, as strange as the new lands early explorers mapped while good wives waited in fear and loneliness lest the wandering ones failed to return. Yet, it has always been true, that where one man dared to go, others would follow, and these, the ones who followed after, often brought their whole families along and knew more joy than those who first came that way, and some of those who came along later, were the children of those who had gone before, and their joys were a recompense to those who had gone ahead, the lonely ones. Maybe Bibi will some day live and laugh and work under conditions which will make you glad that during long, apparently useless days you pushed back the tears and lived alone while I found new places in which to grow. I know that you think that all of this is just a little bit heroic, sometimes I do too, and laugh at myself. But most of the time I am deadly serious about it, as though I had nothing to do with it but simply carried out commands given me by some inner force which never wants to play. I should play more, we should play more, not separately, but together. Sometimes, I forget that no woman is all woman, totally grown up and self-sufficient, but that each in a large measure is a little girl who needs the loving, the understanding, the tolerance and even guidance that little girls need. Sometimes, you forget that all men are just little boys grown up and playing at bigger games, that they too need understanding, encouragement and help even when they seem to be going along at a great pace. We both forget at times that the essence of life lies in making two blades of grass grow where one grew before, in bringing a smile where there was a tear, in giving and sharing as much as we can.
After his tenure with the American Red Cross, Drew returned to work at Howard University and Freedmen's Hospital. He died as a result of a car accident, April 1, 1950. Much has been said about the death of Charles R. Drew because he did not receive a blood nor plasma transfusion as part of the efforts to try and save his life. Many have said and repeated the idea that the reason was due to racism. One of the people who tended to Dr. Drew at the hospital, to which he was taken, was Lucille Crabtree, a nurse anesthetist. She spoke of what happened over 30 years later to one of Dr. Drew's former students, Dr. LaSalle D. Leffel, Jr. He relates what she told him as part of the Digital Manuscripts Program Oral History Project conducted by the U.S. National Library of Medicine's Profiles in Science.
Then she said, "Dr. Leffel, I hope that you will tell his family for me, because I understand that the story has been told that he did not receive proper care." This is 1983. She said, "I hope you will tell them for me," and she pointed to herself, that I was with their father, with her husband. I was there the entire time, and I was monitoring him, giving him some fluids in his veins. I said, "Well, did you give him any blood?" She said, "Dr. Leffel, you have to remember, we were a small hospital. We didn't have any blood. By the time we got blood, Dr. Drew was dead. At that time blood was the preferred method. Rather than giving plasma, give blood. So, he got neither blood nor plasma. Some people say, here is a man who did all this work on blood, and he got neither one. But by the time," she said, "they got the blood, he was dead. He got intravenous fluids, but he did not get blood, or plasma." Most people believe, even trauma experts today, having looked at the apparent injuries here, closed head injury, massive chest injury, and avulsion wounds of the thigh, meaning the tissues, the muscles, were stripped away from the thigh bone, the femur, here, that he probably would not have survived, even in our present system. It is difficult to say 100%, but his injuries were massive. He was the driver. He was the only one who was killed.